So, thank you so much for being here. It's very
Thanks
exciting
for having
to
us,
see,
Carrie-Anne.
It's exciting to see you all in a room together. I feel like this is like a special moment that, like, we're never going to see the Beatles all in the room again, but here,
And
this
let's
is
face
it.
it, we're all headed the same way.
Yes,
Not
yes.
necessarily creatively, just in a sort of mortality way.
And when that happens, I will interview you for a podcast about grief, about that.
Great.
Ready and waiting for that moment. But genuinely, this is so exciting. This is such an exciting moment for fans of comedy, fans of this show, because it's become part of like British comedy history, which is amazing. Did you have any idea when you began this process that you would be at a 20th anniversary at the BFI for this kind of moment?
Yes, I mean, no, we had no idea. We were just a bunch of idiots putting it together with tape and scissors. Well, that's what I felt anyway.
Yeah, I think there was no level of glory to which we didn't aspire at some level. And I think you sort of quite often people say, you know, did you ever dream you'd get a third series? And sort of go, oh, you don't want to see my dreams. I've dreamt about the Battle of Austerlitz and I was Napoleon. You know, a sitcom going well, you know, barely touches the sides.
That's a given. That's definitely going to happen.
So, but I think but nevertheless, down for our hopes, we have exceeded our hopes. Our hopes were to avoid humiliation by getting the respectable accolade of a second series, and then sort of go on to see they did that 2-series thing that was relatively well received, and then
That's all you really need, isn't it? 2 series, and then any more just looks greedy.
Yeah. But so
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible because that is where we live these days, where 1 series, everyone's like, well, just well done, you got 1 series. 2 is like, my God, wow, that's incredible. But Peep Show had 9 series. Like, it's just an incredible achievement. I want to ask, I'm sure most people know this, but just in case there are any peepers. I'm going for peepers. Is that what you call the fans?
Why not?
Let's go with it.
as in an expression for eyes.
No, David, I'm aware of that phrase.
Yeah.
I wasn't checking does everyone else call them peepers? I was checking the collective noun of your fans, peepers.
This would be the time to start.
Yeah, let's call it. Let's go for it. So, Sam and Jesse, where did you guys first meet? Well, how did this writing relationship begin?
My God, we're really getting into it.
Getting into it,
We met at Manchester University doing a creative writing course, and then we met David and Robert doing a team writing exercise at the BBC, and then we saw them doing their stage show in Hammersmith, and it blew our heads off really how brilliant they were. They were great writers in the room. It was a pretty ill-fated exercise, this team writing thing.
Team written thing about squatters, and yes, despite everything, Sam and Jesse's stuff was funny, and we got along. And did we go to play tennis? We played tennis with someone it wasn't Sam and Jesse.
That was different people we played tennis with.
It's so great, what a great gang we are. But I thought
they didn't deliver the hit sitcom script, and they're dead to us.
I definitely played tennis with Jesse though.
Yeah, yes, we've played tennis with Jesse on other occasions. We played tennis with a writer from the
Oh my God, we've actually getting into tennis anecdotes.
He didn't write Peep Show.
This is the trouble with waiting 20 years. We can't fucking remember.
But with the 4 of us kind of
writing.
got along, and we liked each other's comedy despite the very bad premise of the thing. And then,
it's someone else's premise, and was it just the 4 of you? Were there other writers there?
no, there were other writers, mainly tennis players.
Who else was in that
They
room?
should have been concentrating on their writing.
Right.
They were just too busy inviting
There
me
were
to
far
play tennis.
far too many people in the room.
Oh, was it
because
big?
it was basically at the BBC they'd heard of this thing, team writing, and worked out. Well, that must be you get 1 script commission and then get 15 people and put them in a room and say you do the adjectives, you do the prepositions, and it didn't work out.
Are you allowed to say who else was in that room?
We genuinely can't remember.
Oh yeah, I know. There's no worry about libel. You can't remember anybody who was there.
There was no
Animosity. Yes,
there was no there wasn't. It was an ill-fated project, right? Not the personnel who were to blame.
Yeah. You've done this before, haven't you?
And Sam, Jesse, did you have other ideas being developed at the time? Was there other projects that, you know, in that comedy writing way, if you were like, well, this might get after this one, what were the other ones that were
Moon Prison.
Moon Prison? Tell us about Moon Prison, please.
That's what I call a 2-word pitch.
We had Moon Prison. We spent a lot of time working on the Techno Games, which was the Olympics for robots. We wrote links for that. We were
not allowed to be called Olympics for legal reasons.
Yes,
Robot Olympics.
correct. And yeah, I mean, you know, all writers, I think, most writers have to have a big portfolio of things because most things don't work and don't go. So, yeah, I can't. Moon Prison is often.
We were working on kids shows. My Parents' Aliens, The Queen's Nose, shows like that.
Yeah.
Classic, amazing shows. What, can we hear more about Moon Prison? I feel like you're skipping over Moon Prison. And all the peepers are like, what's Moon Prison?
I'm not making this up. We did write a pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so it was a prison.
Yeah, right, with you.
It was set on the moon.
What? Did you have Rob and David in mind for Moon Prison?
No, it was a vanity project, really. But, you know, you know, as writers,
How is that a vanity project?
I mean, you develop your skills by writing stuff that doesn't get made.
Right, I see.
You know, you have to keep cranking them out, and then
Yeah.
hopefully you hit pay dirt. I think when Peep Show came around, we'd already had a couple of shows that were on air that had sort of crashed and burned, that we'd been writers on, that we didn't create. So we really felt like we were going to make sure this one was half decent. We put our backs into it for once because we know how easy it is for a show to just disappear.
Yeah.
Right?
When you started the pilot process for Peep Show, did you feel like as soon as you had a read through and all that stuff, was the reaction different? Were you getting that immediately, like, oh, this is actually really good, this isn't going to crash and burn?
Well, I definitely I remember thinking this is, you know, the other stuff has been interesting and getting hopefully developing our skills and getting our foot in the door and getting an agent, but I really hope this works because I really think this is funny. Like, this is what I want to write, you know, this kind of comedy for these kind of people forever. So if this doesn't work, then maybe I'm not good for the industry and the industry isn't good for me. So yeah, we were really scared but really excited for the opportunity.
And how did you guys feel when you got that script? Did they send it to you, like, did you guys send it before?
It was before email.
It was before email. Oh my God. This is like a retirement home chat about tennis and email.
We've kind of skipped a bit where I don't know why it could be really unimportant and boring. But,
No, it's important.
We skipped a bit where we wrote.
But it still might be boring. That's what Jesse.
I'll do my best.
Okay,
David.
no. Many important things are boring, and the culture needs to realise that.
I'll try and you just be on. You be on that. We wrote a thing called All Day Breakfast where the four of us wrote 2 pilot scripts, like 2 episodes, and we did that with the BBC, and that was great.
Good.
And it was kind of the sort of parent of Peep Show in that there was there were sort of versions of Mark and Jeremy there. I was Otto, who was much bigger than Jeremy and posher, and his dad was an arms dealer. But he had that Jeremy kind of extrovert thing going on, and there was a version of Mark in Phil. And
Phil was, and you know, not just because of my performance, but also in writing, much harder to make funny than Otto. Because, I think
David pointed this out.
Yeah, in Peep Show, obviously Jeremy's a bit like Otto and Mark's a bit like Phil, but Phil is a lot funnier, it turns out, if you can hear what he's thinking.
Oh, yeah.
What he does is incredibly pedestrian and unamusing, but what he's thinking, is potentially funny, and that's, I think, the way it totally redeemed the Phil/Mark as a comic character. The fact that you could suddenly know what was going on inside his head.
So we read those scripts at the BBC, and the controller of BBC 2 wasn't there, and the controller of BBC 3 turned it down. Do you want names?
Yes, I do. 100%.
You can look it up.
So that was, you wrote 2 episodes,
Yeah.
and then you had a lovely read through, and they basically
It was a
turned down.
walkthrough. There was walking around.
Oh, proper walkthrough.
We stood up and everything. We really did just pull out all the
Jeff
stops.
McGivern was in it, brilliant actor.
Oh, yeah,
he
yeah.
played the 3rd Dimbleby brother, fictional Dimbleby brother.
Yes.
Tony Dimbleby.
I've forgotten the Dimblebees.
Yeah.
And they turned it down. Wow.
Yeah.
But it was
I seem to have introduced this completely inappropriate note of bitterness into what is a celebration of something that went right.
But what was it interesting? I think interesting, but definitely important, but possibly boring.
You be the judge.
Is that I think we were envisaged All Day Breakfast as a studio sitcom of the old school,
With a laugh track and everything.
Studio audience, 5 cameras, in a way which is now hardly anything is made like that anymore. So. And obviously, Peep Show is not just not like that; it's particularly different. So, in a way, you were spurred into making that risky visual choice by the controller of BBC Three.
Thank you to him, really.
What an amazing creative input he or she or it has made.
Also, it was at that particular moment, wasn't it, when the sitcom genre was changing. It was all multicam when we started, and then 2 shows came out that I think really made a big impact on us personally, but on the genre, which was Royal Family and Spaced. And they were shot so differently to normal sitcoms. It's like, oh, okay, we should rethink this. What can we do that's different and exciting and visual that's not multicam?
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that wasn't boring, and I think it was interesting.
Okay, we tick both boxes so far.
Yeah. When you filmed, is it right? You filmed 2 pilots.
Yeah, 2 half pilots.
2 half pilots.
Channel 4 commissioned the first half of a pilot, and then 6 months later they commissioned the second half of the pilot. So
wow.
There's a lot of continuity from there.
Well, it was particularly because the flat we shot it in had used the location fee from the first half of the pilot to redo their kitchen. We had actually paid for our own continuity shitstorm.
Incredible. Were you rewriting in that process?
I think this is not the way you normally write a
Yeah,
second
that's
episode.
such a crazy way to
Because
do it.
we literally wrote the first half not knowing what the second half would be.
Okay.
That's not normally how you do it.
And that's how Dickens did his novels.
A real challenge. You thought, we'll just film a bit, see how we feel, wait 6 months.
Yeah, and that became episode 2 of the first season.
With the facial spasming.
With Jeremy Gets a Job, yeah.
That's how I remember. I only remember episodes by what I was doing with my face.
So
I can't use that system because I never do anything with my face.
But I think it's really interesting what you were saying about the all-day breakfast, because that is something that makes, this more, it's a traditional double act in a way, but because we get to hear what's going on, we, especially with Mark, get his sense of vulnerability, which, like you said, must have been missing before. If you don't hear what he's thinking, then he can be quite an arse. But because
I think even if you...
well, no, but then you get to understand how pained he is inside as to himself. So then I think even when he is being awful, it's you know that there's just painful cringing happening 360 degrees of Mark is in pain.
I mean, on paper, they're both quite unpleasant men, basically, aren't they? I mean, they're very human.
Very
I think
human.
that's kind of the best you can say. But they behave quite poorly a lot of the time. And it's not like they do a bad thing and then they feel bad about it.
No.
And then they just carry on doing the bad thing again and again. But you sort of, you were very aware of, because Sam and Jesse would put these other flavours in, and I was very aware that because Jeremy has this kind of cruising petulance and is just horrible so much of the time, that when you see these other bits, like he has a kind of puppyish enthusiasm, and kind of the flip side of that is he's quite vulnerable sometimes. So you've got to seize on those bits and kind of go, and get to play.
Also, Otto was like well off and sort of rich.
yeah.
And we changed that. Ian Morris, Channel 4, suggested, because I think in the first draft of the script, Jeremy owned the flat. And he said that's a bad idea, make Mark the flat owner, which was a really good idea, because taking away some of Jeremy's wealth and power makes him more, I think, sympathetic.
Yeah,
he would have been a bit odious, wouldn't he? Might have been if he.
Oh yeah.
I think setting up the codependency as well, of like he has to be nice to this person who it's clear, if he was rich, Jeremy might have dumped him along the way. When did you find out you got a series then? When was the moment that this year-long pilot process?
We made this pilot in 2 halves in 2001, and we've shot the series in the autumn of 2002. So it's actually 21 years since we were making it.
Oh, we should go. This
so-
is not. This is no point.
So, that means the sitcom could vote before 1968. Sitcoms could vote.
Oh, that was my next question.
Yes,
actually.
that's,
So
I mean, that was
that's-
when the
that's
voting age was lowered to 18.
Dial down the
sorry.
maths joke.
Sorry. But yes, so it was. What I remember is Andrew O'Connor, who sort of ran Objective Productions, set up Objective Productions, and sort of.
And can I just interrupt to say, was formerly on Copycats as an impressionist, and before that had been Young Magician of the Year. That's just how end of the year he was.
The end of the pier Renaissance man.
Yeah.
And but he'd sort of got the commission, really, hadn't he? He'd sort of worked with you and sort of stewarded the project from the start and was the exec of it all the way through. And what I remember is he rang up to tell me it had been commissioned. He rang up and said, and I didn't realise what scene he was doing. That's the problem. He was doing the scene of telling a young comedian that he'd got his big break, and I was just answering the phone. He answered the phone. He said to me, "Are you sitting down?" And I just answered in quite a lot of detail about how I was. No, I'm sort of standing in the corner of a room by a table, but I could. There's an arm of a sofa I could sort of perch on.
Does that help?
And I realised that I'd been given my cue.
You'd ruined it. You'd ruined his moment. Yeah.
And I'd ruined it.
So you started filming when it first came out. What was the reaction like straight away, or were you just happy with what you had made? It didn't matter what the public felt.
We were just pleased to be employed, really, weren't we? And well, it kind of slipped out quite quietly. I mean, it was a late night Channel 4 thing.
We were anxious about how it would be reviewed.
Yeah,
No?
and it was kindly reviewed.
On the whole, right? It was pretty warm.
In fact, the reviews were always good. The figures were never spectacular. The figures were kind of, I got the impression they were sort of on the disappointing side of respectable, all the way
But
through.
the quality of the people.
But the quality. Exactly.
But also, we started off getting low ratings for 2003, and they went down over the course of the series. But they didn't go down as sharply as viewing figures went down in general.
Right.
Over that time. So in a sense, we bucked.
It was a triumph.
Yeah, we bucked the decline of the medium. And so the 1.6 million we got in 2003 was disappointed to Channel 4. The 1.3 million we got in 2015, they were very, very pleased.
I remember it. I vividly remember it coming out, and I was at university, and I remember the trailer for it, and it just being already a funny trailer, which I think is a very hard thing to do for a comedy. And immediately, my student friends being like, "Oh, that's actually funny. We should watch it." And it just felt like you said it was a very nice moment that this show came out, and wasn't everywhere in the way that sometimes they do, like throw a comedy down your throat, but it just grew and grew, and then we were able to learn to love the characters. Did you have, were you confident enough that you had a 9-series arc parked ready, or what did you think of that beginning process? Were you just like, let's just see what happens?
Yeah, me and Sam used to plan the season in great detail, and we spent a lot of time thinking about the plots for each episode. But I think it's true to say we never gave any thought at all to what the subsequent season might be.
True. I think that might have changed after, because Shane Allen at Channel 4 came in and commissioned 2 seasons together. Maybe it was 5 and 6 or something.
Or Andrew.
Or 6 and 7, I can't remember. But that was a big deal. We're quite established.
Okay.
And we were having some thoughts about that.
Oh yes, there was one that sort of ended with a cliffhanger with a race to hospital.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that would have been
That was the time when we knew we had another
coming
6
back.
episodes coming.
Yeah, but usually you would cleverly end it in a kind of, well, if that's the end of Peep Show, then that's a perfectly good ending, and if it's not, then, well, there's a couple of things that might get tied up later.
Yeah, and when did you notice maybe this is more of a question for David and Rob, when did you notice that kind of people in the street stopping you, and it kind of realising that it had sort of moved from, like you said, late night students to being a
Daytime students.
Daytime students. No, to being part, like you said, like where Channel 4 are commissioning 2 series, or like you realise, oh, we're part of comedy's establishment now. Like Peep Show is now up there with Space and with the royal family.
Oh God! Well, that for me that was very recent. I mean, I got invited to this, and the audience people were coming up to say hello quite early on, and I don't know if this is particularly a measure of who was most excited to be watching, or just who had the most social courageousness. But the people who wanted before selfies, people who wanted an autograph, if you can imagine such a thing, they would you wouldn't walk into a student bar and expect a quiet night. I mean, they were sort of young and usually male and usually heading for university or at university, or the girlfriend of some bloke who's obsessed with it, but they love it and they've come round to it, and that became, and it sort of, as the show went on and as we all advanced into the gentle dappled light of midlife, those viewers, it wasn't just my son likes Peep Show, now it's my dad likes Peep Show, but it's never I like Peep Show. Which is, I can respect that, this is Britain. But the core audience kind of stayed the same, but it sort of widened as the show became middle-aged.
Yeah. I think the people who like it are quite enthusiastic about it. So
peepers.
Even when not the peepers,
Stop trying to make peepers a thing.
It's gonna work.
And so I think they were approaching. They were quite even when it was a tiny minority of people who'd seen it, they were probably quite statistically likely to make themselves known.
Yes.
And how did the writing process change for you guys? Did it did one of you start writing one voice more than the other, or did it kind of always stayed as it was at first, those writing a pilot in 2 halves? I assume you allowed yourself to write an episode all in one go.
It didn't really change. I don't think we ever took on a character each or anything. I think that's the fun of writing, actually. You can sort of play all the roles yourself. You don't have to choose. I think we got maybe a bit more confident. Obviously, it was a huge head start writing for a pair of actors and devising characters to suit them. We sort of were early adopters of the Michelin Webb that we know and love. We were sort of in there on the ground floor, so that was a great treat to be able to sort of steal from their comic personae that weren't that well known. So that was a head start, and then as you cast people, you obviously can write then for Olivia Colman and Izzy Sutton, all the other brilliant character actors we had in the show, and that really helps give you that confidence.
Do you, obviously, now we're here, 2024, do you have moments where you still, a Mark thing or a Jeremy line occurs to you on a day and you think, oh, I wish we had another season that I could just put that joke in there?
I do know, and that wasn't a question for me, but what sprang to my mind, and then I started talking, was that I definitely, whenever I put either white or brown toast in the toaster,
that was the trailer.
It's just going to happen.
That was
the
trailer that they did for season. That's the first moment I've remember seeing.
If I'm toasting brown bread, I'm thinking to myself, I'm the one who's laughing because I actually love brown toast. there is that will be true when I'm 86. If I'm still toasting my own bread when I'm 86, which I don't know why I've made that about death.
Did we?
Sorry.
Did we ever do the bit where Mark can't get his key out of the door and then?
Yeah.
You did. We did.
Why don't I get this fixed?
Wasn't that in the pilot?
I
don't think that was in any of the episodes.
Can anyone remember if he? There's an episode, good.
Yeah.
We always wanted to get that bit in, and I think we kept on putting it in and it never quite fitted. So as long as we got that bit in, I'm done.
It's in episode 1. Isn't it?
Oh, is it? I could have stopped much earlier.
So.
I mean, you clearly had. I know you had immense fun making it, and it became a sort of, a family, really. That each season you come back. I mean, it must have been hard to say goodbye to that aspect of it, of these characters that you love, these people that you love, coming back to this comedy writing that you can just be like, oh, Mark and Jeremy, here we go. Was that hard, or did it just feel like it was time?
Yeah, it was really hard. It was hard. I think we liked the sense of challenge of we always wanted every episode to be amazing, and we always wanted every season to be amazing. And it gets, you get tired, and I think by the end, it was almost like a way of being like, let's do a really fucking good one, and it was a way of doing that. And we were all getting a bit older, and some of the stuff that was like the natural material for the show was becoming maybe a little bit further out of reach, and we didn't want to ever be reaching for, you know how it is when, and we had things we had no idea about. So, but it was really sad. The last day on set was very sad, and it's always very emotionally significant seeing everyone. And there's lots of people from the show who are here who aren't on stage, and it's so nice to see them before and see them after.
I almost want them to stand up like
Me
lottery
too.
winners and like do a wave, but I know they would not speak to me. We are going to show the episode, then we're going to come back for more chat with some other people from the show as well. So yeah, don't run off, and please give a round of applause. Please welcome to the stage Izzy Sutty, Rachel Blanchard and Phil Clark. Everybody, make your way down here. And welcome back Sam, Jesse, Rob and David, who'll be joining us as well. And we wanted to mention Olivia and Patterson, as I call them, weren't able to make it, but sent their sincere apologies as well, in case you thought that they'd been snubbed. Oh, we didn't think they'd been snubbed. Yeah, it was so nice to watch that episode in a group setting as well. So lovely. Just super hands. Merry Splissmuffs. Izzy, Dobby, Izzy. Do you remember, were you already a fan of the show when you first got the audition?
Yes, which kind of made it worse, I think. Because if I
yeah.
hadn't heard of it, I would have just been like, oh, this is a crazy name for a show. But actually I was, and it meant a lot. But I just, from the beginning, felt a connection with the character that isn't always there when you go in for something. So, and I had a very odd feeling when I came out that I felt I'd given it my best shot, which I don't know about you guys, but it isn't that common for me to feel that. It was, I wish I'd done it in a Scouse accent, or worn my Flintstone costume or whatever. But I kind of felt like, well, I've done it exactly how I would do it if I got it. So it was a feeling of real satisfaction when I came out of the recall. And at that point, so nowadays actors, it seemed to I always felt like we have to be off book for castings, but back then you could often
be a bit relaxed.
You could look down quite a lot. But with this, you really couldn't, because it showed if you didn't know the lines, because you're doing it all down the lens. So I learnt all the lines for the recall.
That's good of you.
Thank you. That was the least I could do.
That's how you know you really want a job, isn't it? When you really bother. You're like,
Yes,
I'm actually
stay up
bothering.
all night.
Yeah, I don't normally do this. And Rachel, you appeared in the first episode of Series 2. So that's right at the beginning of Peep Show's journey. Were you aware of the show by that point?
No, I auditioned in Los Angeles. I had actually never heard of the show. It was before streaming, so you didn't hear about shows from abroad as much. And I remember reading the sides. I didn't know you were looking down the barrel until we were on set. Reading the sides, and I just remember the line, "Now fuck me and pretend I'm your mom."
Who would like to take ownership of that line? Would anyone like to talk
It was
us
good.
through?
There was quite a lot of lovemaking in that series, and of course, what we would always do, in a way, because the POV style kind of saved you, because you were just having the Nick Martin, the cameraman, who was the hardest working man in show business at the time, just jumping up and down on top of you, and he was a gentleman, and to me anyway, and he was so it was a lot less embarrassing than it could have been. Yeah,
I was looking at Wikipedia today for research, and the list of Jeremy's lovers, like it's a really long list of ladies and men, as we know from my series, that Jeremy worked his way through. And I remember you saying that to me on the first, like, don't worry, you're not going to have to touch me. Because you do have to just, it's POV. How was that for you, Rachel? Were you disappointed that...
With the sex or with the POV?
With... No, because it's such an unusual way of filming something, and it's a very unusual way, especially if you are playing love interest to somebody, that you really don't spend a lot of time looking into their eyes, connecting, having that emotional relationship with them.
It was, well, there were two things that took a minute to get used to. We did the helmet cam, the second season, which I was particularly bad at. You had a hard helmet and little camera.
Yeah, so we gave this up after you left, actually. So to start with, in the pilot and for the first 2 series, that there was we would film everything sort of twice, and the first time using a mini cam that was attached to a cycle helmet, and then because the quality of that was so rubbish, we'd film it properly with a normal camera. And then, we eventually just got less interested in the POV thing and more interested in the sitcom, and the minicam sort of disappeared. But at one point in the first series, I was driving around, and it wasn't the kind of show that had a budget for putting a car on a truck where you pretend to drive. We were driving, and also I had the camera on, and I'm doing the scene with David, and I'm getting notes back going, we keep missing David. Could you look at him a bit more? And I'm literally trying to drive around central Croydon whilst not crashing a car and remembering my lines and filming David. So who says comedy actors can't multitask?
I'm glad they put safety, your safety eventually first.
It was incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Phil, when those scripts first landed on your desk for season 1, did you have the same feeling like, oh, this is something pretty special?
Yeah, for sure. And I wasn't involved in the original pilot. And
it's not your fault that pilot was filmed separately.
No, and I came across the show because I bumped into Tony Roach in. Do you remember Borders, the bookshop Borders? Bumped into Tony Roach, and he said, "Oh, you should read Yours Truly, Piers Stone, Yours Truly," which Sam had written. And so I read it. I was in Borders, so I bought it. And I thought, this is a really brilliant book. And I sort of asked Sam to come in to talk back at the time. And Sam came in and sort of we spoke a bit. And then you said, you should meet my writing partner, Jessie. And I remember thinking, I'd be delighted to meet her. And so and then both you guys came in, and then you very kindly sent me the pilot and said, do you want to produce the series? And I had just done Big Train at the time. I just finished Big Train, and we were going to do a 3rd series, and there was a thing called, I just remember this, there's a thing called the Jane Root 3 Million Club. And Jane Root was the controller of BBC Two at the time. And if you did a show for Jane Root and you got an audience of 3 million or over, you were invited to have a drink with Jane Root.
What a club.
So,
catchy name they've got there, yeah.
And I did the 2nd series of Big Train, and it got 2.8 million, and I never got to have a drink with Jane Root. And and the series didn't come back. And I was at Talkback, and I was literally feeling a bit embarrassed every time Peter Fincham went past my office. I was sort of pretending to write something, like, it's gone, okay, I don't know what to do. And then you guys sort of came to the rescue and said, do you want to come and do this series? So it was like, great, these scripts are fantastic. I knew Robert and David from previous things we'd done, so it was a dream gig. It was fantastic. It's the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me. It's amazing.
I find that amazing comedy fan-wise that Big Train didn't do well enough. Therefore, you moved on to Peep Show. I'm glad that both those things exist. Izzy, do you have a favourite moment from filming the show, or like a favourite Dobby moment?
My favourite moment overall is the episode, I'm not in this series, I don't think at all, where you two go on the barge and you have to eat the chicken. I just think it's so funny. And also at the wedding with you and Sophie, where you wee and it all falls down. And I think it's an extra. I don't think this person has lines, but it goes onto a woman's hat.
It wasn't real wee.
Yeah, that's very disappointing, actually. I wanted it to be your wee. But they're my 2 favourite moments that I wasn't in. In terms of stuff that I was in, I mean, it was a really lovely show to work on, genuinely. When I joined it, I'd only done a few small telly jobs, and I was sort of convinced I would get sacked all the time. I think it was completely silent for the first series I was in, apart from when I said my lines. And then I slowly realised, I'm back here and it's another series, everything's all right. And I loved doing the paintballing. I don't know if anyone remembers that episode, but I remember sort of being there for days and days. It was probably only one day. But I just remember that being really lovely because it was summer. And I hadn't been paintballing before. Ticks these things off.
So it was exciting doubly for Dobby and for Izzy because you got to go paintballing.
Absolutely, that's a great thing about acting. You get to do all this stuff. My least favourite moment, I'm sorry to say, is the stationery cupboard scene. I understand why it's necessary. I understand why it exists. I found it very difficult because David and I didn't know each other at all. There was no bodily contact whatsoever. It was, lots of people, including Nick Martin, who was mentioned before, the amazing cameraman who was the sole person, at least from series 5 onwards when I was in it, who filmed absolutely everything. And I remember a lot of us crammed into this cupboard and lots of discussion about logistics and how will we show both their faces at the same time. Then it decided that there would be a mirror in the stationery cupboard, which is reasonably unusual. The stationery cupboard, for there to be, presumably for people just to check their reflection when they go and get a stapler. But when I can't watch that scene because I find it too intense to watch. And that was my first episode, I think, and my mum and dad were very excited because I was going to be on. God, they said, we'll tell everyone at Bridge.
Oh, no.
You just wait until the one after that.
Start with the next one. Rachel, do you have a favourite moment from filming the show?
To this day, it's genuinely one of my most favourite jobs that I've had and one of the best experiences working I've had. It was just, every day was so much fun and everybody was so kind and genuinely, you work in LA and there are a lot of not as kind people who
asshole.
And everyone was so smart and such good writing and so kind, and that was relatively unusual as an experience for me. So it was kind of every day was great, and then every time Super Hands was on set, I thought that was really fun.
It was pretty unusual at that time, right, to get Rachel over. Like we really wanted somebody you're Canadian, but we wanted somebody North American and play American, and it was a pretty big deal, wasn't it?
It was a big deal. It was all it felt touch and go, and there was funny enough, we were talking about this earlier. We weren't sure, even to the final moment, whether you were coming or not, and there's sort of been some mixed messages, I think, from something that got lost in translation. So I had to go to Heathrow Airport. We thought we knew what flight you were on, so I had to wait at arrivals, and every young woman who walked through the thing, I just went, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. Ages and ages. You came through, thank God. So
I'm kind of amazed there were no other Rachels that day. You were like, oh, I'll be in Peep Show, yeah.
I think people thought it was sad, she's never coming. This guy, he's obviously, she's been waiting for years.
Oh, this is painful.
They still talk at Heathrow about the Rachel man. What became of him?
What's better is that they were like, oh, she's not coming, and then Rachel came through and they were like, wow, okay. He was right to keep trying.
It was like you were lovely, and then that's it. And then we got your car, didn't we? And
well, yes, I remember there was a car waiting for me, and you're like, "Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome." I thought everyone knew I was coming.
Yeah. It's good
and
we got it
turned
ironed
around
out.
and went back on the tube.
I went on the home
and tube. You want a lift? And you're like, "Oh, I'll take the subway home."
No, I thought because you came from sort of LA, and I thought that you would think it would be very unprofessional for me to get in the car with you.
I thought it was very strange that you.
Sorry. So I put you in the car and got the tube back to the office.
I remember it so clearly.
It's the most delightfully English thing. And then this poor Canadian actress being like, where is he going? That's very, very very sweet.
Because it was a really quick hello.
Oh, it's a quick hello. Thank you.
Hello,
Thank
just wanted
you.
to say hello. Thank you so much for coming. Bye. Here's your card.
Did I say thank God? Oh, I probably curtsied, didn't I, or something? But I remember getting back to the office and like, she's here, thank God. That's really funny. Anyway, sorry.
I just love that there was a time when actresses were hired, but no one was sure they would turn up. Like, fingers crossed. Because I remember you from being in the Clueless TV show, which was like a very big part of my growing up. And so when you again on the Peep Show adverts, it was very exciting. And as you said, it was unusual. It felt like you had a sort of famous guest star, which wasn't really that common in British sitcoms, particularly. No, everyone agrees. Great. Rob, Dave, do you still have? Is it a stupid question to ask you what your favourite moments from filming are, or is there too many?
I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is that barge, just because it was. I'd had so much fun playing the boyfriend that runs over and then tries to bury and then burns and then eats his girlfriend's dog. It's just so extreme, but it just gets there because the Sam and Jesse script, as usual, is just so brilliant. It gets there in these small, perfectly logical half steps. I think perfectly logical. And I remember just being on that barge and it being quite difficult. Because filming days are long and you're always up against the clock. It's not always constantly hilarious, and we're not always falling around going, Jesus Christ, I'm so glad that I'm an actor in Peep Show. But sometimes we really were laughing. And I remember having trouble getting through that scene. I certainly remember that after that scene, going away and I started picking my teeth. And I thought, that's just so horrible. It was all great. But I can't, and then I sort of see episodes and it kind of comes back. But that springs to mind.
I think it was always... The corpsing was always at its worst when Patterson was around. And I particularly remember the scene. It wasn't in some ways not a high point for me when I'm sitting on the loo having diarrhea and the noises and and you sort of feel like, even though I didn't really have diarrhea then, you sort of feel that you are betraying more about yourself than you perhaps want to, because in a sense, much as I wanted it to be Mark Corrigan, it was also, that's what I'm like when I have diarrhea.
It's the last thing you want. You want someone going, is that what you do?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, and then that would be, there's an insight into those very private, low moments we all have that most of you have probably not had to share, on national television. But it was definitely, the experience was mitigated by the difficulty that Patterson had saying, is that normal pooing?
He would quite often be his own worst enemy because he would put these extra vowels into. I mean, he's very much an actor after my own heart, actually. And he would if he had to say any German, he would suddenly it would be Frankfurt, and suddenly there were these new syllables would appear, and he caught himself. And that's just fun.
Yeah, I mean, you're a big fan, Sam and Jesse, of the kind of group dining scene. And I was thinking that with that episode, there must have been a lot of corpsing, particularly.
Yes, but how many times did you see actual food going into actual mouths?
Yes.
Because
No, none at all.
I don't think we did badly, actually. I saw there was quite a lot of actual eating happening there.
I saw Matt put a potato in.
Yeah.
So that meant there were like 38 times he ate that potato.
Absolutely. I definitely went for a carrot at one point.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, it's better than a lot of episodes of Downton Abbey. You see them sitting all around there in their finery, and I count one pea in the whole scene.
Yeah, because the group, the scene in Series 9 where you make your special dish, your lettuce
It's Moroccan,
dish.
actually.
Moroccan. And I remember the only person eating it was I've forgotten his name, the actor who played Joe, who ate the pasta every single time. Bart,
Yeah.
thank you. Bart ate plates and plates of it, even though you specifically said don't.
Fool.
No, you gave a tip at the beginning of don't eat it, but Bart was like, no, it's part of the character. And that was, when you revealed your art, that was just that was a lot of corpsing that day, and Patterson was not around, so I think you can't blame Patterson for all those moments. Sam and Jessie, is there a particular moment that still stands out for both of you, or is it too hard to pick?
I find that question so hard. 15 years of the show.
Yeah, I don't. You are. I mean, yeah. I remember a few sort of days on set. We shot that. There was a picnic, where Superhands reveals he has the twins.
Yeah.
It was just filming the show can often be, delightful, but you've still got a lot to do and it's tough. I just remember that being a nice summer day, and Olivia was there, and I think we had enough time, and those little bits you remember. But in terms of the funny stuff, I'm very, very fond of the turkey exchange in that, because it's, Rob was talking about when you see that sweet side of Jeremy, and it's very, I find it very appealing.
He had bought the turkey. I know, I completely forgot that on the rewatch. I completely forgot that he...
Bit of a continuity error, though. The turkey in the fridge is much bigger than the turkey that appears later. I don't know why we thought we were getting away with that.
There is one moment, actually, which stood out for me. In the first season, you're in the bathroom, and Mark says to Jeremy, in a very horrible way, nothing you want is ever going to happen. And I just thought, this is the kind of show I like, because no one would. It's such so vicious, but yeah, you did it with such sort of both of you.
It sounds true when you say it, doesn't it?
It's so horrible. I was like, is this good? Yeah, I think this is good. This is terrible. It's like a kind of Pikettian nightmare. And that was like, we've clicked into something here.
That's the strength of their relationship, I think, is that they do say awful things to each other quite a lot, but then they also rescue each other quite a lot. And I think that's what, you relate to from watching a friend who will be honest with you sometimes. I think that's such an important part of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't overstate that. I mean, they kind of... I think they're given to moments of sentimentality about how long they've been hanging out together. I think that's as high as I could put their love, really.
Yeah, I know.
That's the thing, though. And
they're codependent.
Absolutely. Their rock bottom self-esteem is only lifted to a tiny extent by reflecting on the fact that they're not as bad as the other one.
Yeah.
And so that they're fortunate enough to live with the one person they despise most in the world. And that keeps them from despair, I think. But at the end, I'm watching that one. Mark is just horrible. And you sort of see his father, and you think, okay, you can see, but he's horrible, and I feel like he is less redeemed than Jeremy.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, his dad is really horrible.
Clive Merriman doing that kind of like 3 glasses of wine and just immediately kind of the mechanism.
It's a brilliant performance, but I think again it's the fantastic writing of Peep Show that as soon as we see Mark's parents, we do forgive Mark quite a lot of stuff, because you do feel so sorry for him because his parents are fucking awful. Is it still the thing that you get stopped by fans for, do you think?
Primarily, yes. I remember being very near here when the first series that I was in was on, and being chased by approximately 30 people who were young, about 20 or 21, and they were screaming about Peep Show, and I thought, oh my God, this is the way my life's going to be. Do I like it? I guess so. That's never happened again. But yes, primarily, and a bit like you were saying earlier, still, if I go out in East London, because it gets shown to a new generation, as you say, people will go, my mum or my dad, is normally my dad, likes Peep Show, and I do too, and then you think, oh, okay, it's lovely, it's always, and I always say it's the writing. I mean, I think, you two are expertly cast and you are brilliant, and it's just the perfect combination, I think, of you four primarily, that are the bedrock of it. I really think that. None of
Something that hasn't been mentioned yet is that Sam and Jessie would work so hard on the story that David and I were just kind of, and their attitude to throwing things out if they didn't quite fit left me and David, who were very into recycling, and was very, our attitude to rewriting at the time was a bit like the Fonz at the beginning of Happy Days, who he's about to comb his hair and then he just goes, come on. And I think that was kind of how we felt when somebody asked for a second draft. But Sam and Jesse just worked until the story was right, and then it felt like they would just treat themselves to some hilarious dialogue at the end of the process. But the hard work was getting those stories right, and that was we learned a lot from them in that way, because it worked emotionally, even if it hadn't been full of brilliant jokes.
I think it
makes the show
I
special.
totally agree. I'd never worked with any writers who'd worked so hard before. You guys just kept going in a way that a lot of writers understand it. You're like, this is great, and we've done enough now, and you would continually question it and say, is it good enough? Is it good enough? It's incredibly impressive.
I think it was you, Phil, saying, is it good enough? Is it good enough?
But also right through the edit, because the fact that there's an internal monologue, scenes could always be cut, and the interior monologues could always be rewritten. So the polishing and the adding of jokes and the sort of making the plot smoother carried on all the way through the process. And I think it was a benefit of certainly the being able to cut a bit that wasn't working and then do a voiceover that covered that was just made the episodes tighter than they would have been without that format. But your willingness to come up with great gags that we didn't know on set, we'd just come in and record at the end of the process, was sort of amazing.
That's absolutely true. I'm sure you remember this thing where you'd get a cut and it would just be, every now and then there'd be a line where someone, it was usually Becky Martin, the director, would just put, funny joke here, funny line now, funny line now. It's just like, there you go, guys, back to you again. So I don't know how you did that. You always came in and just nailed it completely.
And you used to have a terrifying phrase, which was, could this be funnier? about those lines. We'd write 10 and come up with the one we thought, or a couple we'd often record, right? You'd come and record a few and see which seemed to fit best, and then Phil would say that dreadful phrase, could this be funnier?
We're going to have another episode. Does anyone want to explain why this episode is being shown now, why it's been chosen? David or Rob, is there a reason?
It's probably the best one.
It's the best one. It is from season 4. It's weddings. Please give them a huge round of applause.
I think one thing, I guess it's sort of cheesy, but I think we really enjoyed writing a show that we thought was really, really funny and that would make, Phil and especially David and Robert laugh, and the confidence that the thing that you think is really good, even if it seems a bit odd, there's a Kenneth Halliwell and Joe Orton joke in there. It's like, what the fuck did that come from? That's not the high point of the episode, but being able to, doing peculiar things and discovering they might appeal to people is like a very comforting thing. That's my thought.
Who calls a new character in a new sitcom Super Hands and thinks, probably in the same flat, having the same arguments.
I really wondered, how did they cope with the pandemic? That's what I kept thinking. How did Mark cope with that?
I think Mark would have loved it.
Loved it, yeah.
So many rules, and
Bleaching the shopping.
Yeah. And essentially Mark and Jeremy would both have enjoyed having different views about the lockdown from each other. But the thing is, one of the reasons I think we stopped doing the show is we were too old, and it's about young men.
Yeah.
And the thing about sitcom, and the thing that makes sitcoms brilliant as an art form is that they're about life not changing, and most of the other art forms are about change, and change isn't necessarily the overwhelming experience of being human. So Mark and Jeremy they only exist in that place and that time. And The Simpsons does it brilliantly in that it's been going for 20 years, but nothing has changed. The baby is still sucking a dummy. And that's the same with Mark and Jerry. They don't get older, and when we were getting older, the show had to stop. So they're exactly where they were. And if we ever did anything about old Mark and Jeremy, it's almost like that would be different, almost different people.
Then you can call it Peepers.
We'd watch it. We'd watch it. Oh, things got thrown away.
I did write a whole draft where Johnson killed himself.
Yeah. True.
It wasn't that funny.
It happened off screen, right? It wasn't like,
Oh yeah, it's fine. It's off screen.
But it still was something of a downer.
But
Do
you
you
did kill
remember
Gerard,
that?
didn't you? You killed Gerard.
Yeah.
Got rid of Gerard. We got one. Good luck, and yeah, I do think make yourself laugh, and you don't know where it's going to go from there, but do trust your instinct to write what you think is funny. Ways in which it's changed, we're quite far from. I don't know whether Phil might have a better sense than us in some ways.
It's sort of, television has changed. Society changes and expectations change. I think some people in comedy sort of go, oh, well, you can't say things now that you could say. And I don't think actually that's really true. I think it's like it's like all of us, really. We all change, and yet we don't. And I think that is like comedy. So although there are certain, probably some things we did back then in possibly the 90s that you wouldn't do now, I don't think fundamentally anything is really different, because we're not really fundamentally different, even though we have, society has slightly different attitudes. So, I think the fundamental rules are all the same. It was really interesting when earlier on we were talking about, Mark and Jeremy, and I was thinking it goes all the way back, their relationship, to Laurel and Hardy, who, they bicker, they sort of, argue, and then an outside force comes and they both unite, and they're against that force. And in a way, Mark and Jeremy bicker and argue and hate each other in a way that only two people who love each other really can. So, and I think that's really true. So, the world has changed so much since the 1920s, and yet nothing has changed. So, I think that's it, really. Yeah.
We're convinced they love each other, whatever you say.
That's fine. I'm going to let that go.
Jim Howick isn't here, is he? We invited, but he didn't make it.
Couldn't make it.
I don't remember it being that big a deal.
I think maybe we learned from our mistake with Johnson's suicide. It's like there's a way of doing a funny death, hopefully, which is that it's kind of random and yet somehow predictable, because he's been quite sickly.
It's so Gerard.
Yeah. It's all played off your very funny reaction.
The thing, I think it's great in a way that Gerard's death is just the punchline to all the annoying ailments that he's been exhibiting for ages. It's just kind of, he sort of had to die, because it's the only way of finishing that, that. And the Mark's irritation at Gerard's illnesses, and then fundamentally irritation at his death. I think it's a side of people dealing with death that isn't much dramatised.
I had to phone Jim to warn him that he was going to die. And it was one of the worst phone calls I've ever had to make. It really was. It was sort of like telling him, you're going to die. See you later.
Are you waiting at Heathrow for him?
Well, you have to say where the idea came from.
I think the
it
idea
certainly didn't come from me.
And We were talking about I think one impulse was like, in a way, Superhands is the version of Jeremy that he sort of almost, that's his sort of dream version of how a great man might be. Yeah. And I guess Johnson is that for Mark, and then I guess the sort of homoerotic confusion sort of flowed naturally out of the very high esteem that he held him in.
That was Patterson's note, in the first read-through. He was saying there wasn't much homoerotic stuff in the first draft. Patterson was like, well, clearly he has a crush on it. It was like, maybe we should do that.
Maybe we should push that.
The bit I enjoyed most in the episode was the moustache that was never mentioned, glowing on his face. I was pleased with that.
And it was a lot of bother that there were, because the moustache, there were at least 3, maybe 4. Because in each scene we had to, where are we on, because nothing gets shot in order, where are we on Mark's moustache growing graph now? And it's yes, it's never mentioned in dialogue or anything, but it's just, that's his. But so essentially you're saying, Mark, it's as much narcissism from Mark as homoeroticism. He sees himself in Johnson, and which is the opposite of what he also says. In another episode, he's watching TV and a woman on the television says, I'm on a dating show. I'm kind of looking for someone just like myself. And Mark goes, that's the opposite of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, Rob, come on.
Jeremy's not a very nice man.
I'm so sorry.
That was the paintballing day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was when I had to face the fact that Dobby wasn't 100% nice, actually. She changed.
Yeah, well, that's because she's been going out with Mark.
I think it's a beautiful example of how everyone is a little bit flawed and people make unusual decisions, and if they'd made the normal decision, you wouldn't watch it. And I think we've, as peepers, watched those. It's gonna work there. We've watched those episodes, and that's the joy of this show, is that every time they start doing something, you are screaming inside, being, please don't fucking do that, but you also desperately want them to piss themselves in a church. You have been such an amazing audience. Thank you so much for being with us such a long night. We really hugely appreciate it. Please give a massive round of applause for Izzy, Rachel, Bill, Sam,